One, two, Jungkook is my boo. A loud, shrill voice pierced through the stillness of the quiet night. She swayed side to side, singing gibberish things and with every step bursting into fits of laughter. The cold night air hit her face flushed with the effect of alcohol. She was drunk, precisely wasted, completely unfazed by the worries of the world and the danger that loomed in the shadows at night. The alcohol in her system made her brave enough to roam in the barren streets without an ounce of fear. Being the wife of a mob boss meant she was walking on eggshells. One mistake and the consequences could be losing her life. And when she had a sword hanging around her neck all the time, she should be aware of her surroundings, as careful as a dog. Then what led her to be here so unbothered about it? The reason was her husband John Jungkook. For the past 1 week, he had been extremely busy with an important deal, resulting in him spending very little time with her. It made her feel alone. Thus, she decided to dine outside alone without him. She explored the streets, devouring the street food. The bodyguards were following her, keeping an eye from a respectful distance. Jungkook had asked them to keep her safe, but at the same time not to interrupt her personal time. However, she being the absolute troublemaker escaped their eyes by taking the advantage of market crowd. She bought 2 bottles of soju. One of them was already in her stomach and the other one was in her hand as she stumbled in the street, singing and drinking like a one-sided, heartbroken lover. 3, 4, he doesn't love me anymore. She sang and paused as her lips puckered into a sad pout. She knew he was busy, and he would come around and shower her with love once he got done with the deal. However, she couldn't help but feel lonely. He really doesn't love me. He doesn't take me out on a date. He doesn't eat with me. Doesn't sleep with me. He is not my lovely Jungkook anymore. She mumbled, her words incoherent and slurry due to the alcohol in her system. Walking mindlessly, she stumbled on a stone. She scolded, her expression hardened as she kicked the stone with as much strength as she could muster, but she tripped and fell hard on the pavement, flat on her face. Idiotic stone, she grumbled, groaning loudly as she slowly pushed off the ground and sat upright. Her hardened gaze darted at the stone, looking at it with an accusatory glare. You stone! How dare you trip me? Do you know who I am? She pointed a finger at herself, throwing murderous glares at the stone as though it was a living person and she would kill him at the first chance she get. Do you know who my husband is? He will kill you if he got to know that you tried to harm me. Yes, that's right. He'll. She scolded, her words stumbling over each other in a slur. Her rant was cut off by a sudden glare of headlights, blinding her vision. She blinked and raised her hand to shield her eyes, squinted at the dark silhouette of the car that came screeching to a halt in front of her. The car door flung open, and a tall figure moved towards her with terrifying speed and intensity, stopping right in front of her. She rubbed her eyes and lifted her gaze from the polished shoes to the face of the person. Jungkook, she whispered, and a wide smile broke out on her lips. Palming her hands on the ground, she lifted herself onto her feet, almost sagging in the process. Jungkook, she screeched loudly, throwing herself at him. He didn't waste another moment to embrace her as tightly as possible. His grip was so tight, almost bruising, but she was too drunk to care about it. Ryan, his voice, deep and rough with panic, sliced through her drunken haze. She felt his heartbeat, a wild, frantic rhythm insinuating his state. Thank God you are safe, he murmured, burying his face in her hair. He was shaking, trembling with relief. His grip tightened even more, and for a moment she couldn't breathe. I can't breathe, she whined, wriggling in his hold. He sighed, finally losing his grip slightly, but still holding her close in his embrace. I went bonkers when I got a call from your guards that you were missing. She cut him off, pulling apart from the hug. Her brows twisted in confusion. Then she giggled, patting his chest clumsily, I wasn't missing silly. I was just exploring all of my own. She stepped back, spreading her arms, nearly knocking herself off balance in the process. His expression hardened. Joe clenched as he tried to keep his composure. His eyes raked on her disheveled state. Her dress was greasy, having stains of sauce, and the food items seemed shivered throughout the evening. Her face flushed, and her hair was like she hadn't washed them for a month or so. She looked nothing less than a homeless person. His eyes narrowed at the soju bottle in her hand. He snatched it and threw it away. The sound of glass shattering against the floor echoed through the heavy silence. She gasped loudly, gaping at him with big, offended eyes. Why did you do that? It was a sweet drink. I wanted to drink it. You. She choked on her words as tears poured in her eyes. You are so bad, she mumbled, disappointment and hurt lacing her tone. Jungkook ignored her remarks and yanked her closer by holding her arms. And what about you, huh? Do you have any idea what could have happened? How reckless? Before he could finish, his gaze shifted, catching something over her shoulder. His expression changed instantly, a sudden lethal coldness glinting in his eyes. His entire body tensed, coiling like a predator about to strike. He looked at her who was glaring at him with glossy eyes, her complaints muffled against his chest as his one arm slid around her waist, pulling her closer. Stay still, he whispered, his voice suddenly calm, too calm, but unaware of the looming danger, she kept wriggling in his arms. Her lips never stopped blabbering. Ignoring her weak protest, he reached for his gun tucked nearly into the waistband of his pants. Leave me, you're so bad, she blabbered, still too tipsy to sense the heaviness of the situation. But Jungkook wasn't listening to her. His gaze locked on something behind her. Holding her still with one arm, he raised his gun and fired. The soft, muffled thuds of 3 shots rang out in quick succession, each one precise, each one fatal. She froze when she heard a distant scuffle, the sound of bodies hitting the ground, and then silence. She blinked, trying to process what had just happened. Jungkook, she whispered, craning her neck to look over her shoulder. 3 figures lay crumpled in the shadows, dressed in dark clothing and compact boots. She squinted, trying to focus, but everything was spinning too fast. Who were they? She mumbled, meeting his eyes. Trouble, he stated, his gaze still stuck on the bodies. He tucked his cannon back and tore his gaze away from the dead man to her. She blinked up at him innocently. They were trouble, and they were here for you. He was still holding her close. She felt none of the fear she should have. Instead, she grinned ear to ear. Her intoxicated state was far above any danger, any fear. But you saved me from trouble. Aren't you a good husband? Her grin widened as she pulled his cheeks, giggling to herself. His face was blank as he kept his gaze locked with her. Then his gaze softened. You know you shouldn't have been out here alone at this hour. I told you it's not safe. Before he could finish, she was already wriggling out of his hold with surprising strength. I don't care, she burst out, stumbling back, her legs wobbled, her eyes wide and wild, looking around to find something to have fun. I don't care if it's safe or not. I wanted to. She giggled and turned, swaying as she ran towards the nearby bridge. The metal railing gleamed under the moonlight, and below, the dark water of the river glinted like black silk. Vian stopped. His voice was sharp, almost panicked as he ran after her, but she just laughed and shook her head. She almost tripped on her heels. Fuming at the interruption, she kicked off the shoes. "No, it's fine." She reached the edge, peering over with wide, excited eyes. She looked back at him and pointed at the river below. "Look, it's just a pool." She tittered, leaning forward dangerously. Jungkook's heartbeat accelerated due to fear, his steps fastening due to reflex. "Vian," he shouted when she started climbing over the edge. He was there in an instant, scooping her up before she could topple over the edge. No! She shrieked loudly, kicking and thrashing to free herself from his hold. I want to swim! Put me down! Put me down! Enough! His voice was low, guttural roar, and the sheer force of it stunned her into silence. He held her tightly, his grip unyielding. We are going home, now. She shook her head, still struggling in his hold. Meanwhile, Jungkook's patience was running thin. He was barely holding himself from snapping at her. I want to swim in this big pool. We don't have a big pool like this in our home. Jungkook's jaw clenched in anger. His dark, blazing gaze bent her with a stern look. Her weak protest subsided. Her eyes dropped to the floor. I'm not in the mood for your place, so no more tantrums. We are going home, yeah? His dangerously calm voice sent a shiver down her spine. She nodded and went limp, burying her head in his chest. My heels, I'm not leaving without them, she murmured, pointing at the footwear she kicked off earlier. Jungkook inhaled sharply, going back to grab her shoes. He loved her, but he couldn't deny that she always managed to get on his nerves. She is a handful. With her protest dying, he carried her back to the car. He was angry. In fact, he was fuming in rage, but he would rather hurt himself than venting it on her. He tugged her in and darted a glare at to which she quickly closed her eyes, pretending to be asleep. He shook his head at her dramatics and drove back home. Put me down! She thrashed her limbs as Jungkook carried her to the bed. He looked pissed as she was throwing tantrums throughout the car ride and now to the bedroom. He made her sit on the edge of the large bed, but she, being the troublemaker she was, got up and tried to rush past him. However, he held her arm and pulled her back on her previous spot. Stay put before I lose my temper. You had already pissed me off by going out without informing me, and to create more trouble, you snuck out away from the guards. That was so not nice of you. She pouted sadly and looked down like a kid getting scoldings by their mum. You always do this, she whispered and then lifted her head to meet his eyes. He frowned. Confusion marred his expression. She scoffed and rose from the bed. You never let me go out and explore. You have put restrictions on me. I can't do things of my own will. I need to ask you before everything. It's getting suffocating. Jungkook blinked. His stoic hard expression faltered, but he quickly regained his composure. Suffocating? Seriously, Ryan? When did I deny you for anything? And when did I ask you to ask me for permission? I just asked you to inform me about your whereabouts so that I don't look for you like a madman. And I do the same, right? I inform you every time I need to go somewhere. And that's what I don't like, informing you about every small or big thing. Sometimes I just want to be myself and go somewhere without telling anyone. Can't I do that? I'm getting tired of you controlling me like I'm some kind of puppet. Heart flushed in Jungkook's gaze, but he didn't let it show on his face. Go to sleep. You don't know what you are saying under the influence of alcohol. I don't want us to argue when one of us is clearly not in her senses. He tried to walk past her, but she grabbed his arm and pulled him to stand in front of her. Jungkook sighed, rubbing his temple to control his frustration. He was already stressed about the deal that was taking forever to get over. Also, he was upset because he wasn't giving the time and attention to her as she deserved. On top of that, the night's incident, her going missing, the goons, and the now baseless argument was taking toll on his mind. You can't leave until I'm done talking. You don't want to spend time with me, nor do you want me to go out alone. What am I supposed to do? Look pretty and sit in the mansion like a good little mafia wife? That's what you want me to do? She snapped, breathing heavily, frustration boiling over. Jungkook closed his eyes, reminding himself that she wasn't sober, but he was. He couldn't afford to behave as recklessly as her and mess up the already messed situation. He took a deep breath and looked at her, now with a soft expression. Sweetheart, okay. I'm sorry if you feel like that. You know I've been occupied with work lately. I'm trying to be better. I'll wrap up the pending work really quick and then I'll take you on a long vacation. For now, go to sleep here. Gave her a small smile, but she scoffed and wrenched his hand away. Fake promises, lies and lies. You always do this. Let me guess. After this deal would be over, another one came up and we'd be back on square one. She rolled her eyes and looked away, crossing her arms across her chest. Jungkook twisted his hands, looking at her in disbelief. What had gotten into her? Why was she arguing over nothing? He was on the verge of losing his cool, and she wasn't helping the situation either. You are really crossing your limits, sweetheart. I agree I haven't been spending time with you, but I already told you the reason. And fake promises, you said? We'll talk about it when you sober up. Let's end this conversation here. I'll forget we ever had this conversation. Just don't put another stunt next time. Stay with the guards. I don't need your guards, she snapped, cutting him off in between. Her gaze bored through his as they both stood silent for a moment, glaring at each other with the same intensity. I don't need them. I want to breathe. I want to go out alone. I don't need them hanging on my shoulders. Can't you understand me? I want to breathe. She punctuated every word with great emphasis, irking Jungkook in the worst way possible. They are for your security because I can't be with you all the time, he said with utter calmness, the calmness which spoke volumes, which insinuated the stillness before a thunderstorm. It was an indirect warning for her to stop, or the things were going to get messy for real. And why do I need the security? Because of you. I don't want it. I don't want this life. I want to live a normal life like a normal. Should I have married a normal man then? He snapped, glaring at her with dark eyes. She flinched at his sudden outburst. She could feel the extent of his anger, but the alcohol in her system made her bold enough to keep going, to keep provoking him, and to keep testing his patience. You should have married a normal man if you wanted a normal life. I warned you, right? I warned you beforehand, but you were so eager to follow me around. Did you forget the number of times you snuck into my room at night, or the meetings you had interrupted? Jungkook was barely holding himself back. She had said enough. Now it was his turn to make her remember the reality and knock some senses in her drunken head. Was it me barging in your office without any prior notice, getting jealous of every other human because they were talking to you? She lowered her gaze, knowing he was right. It was she who fell in love with him. Not the rainbow kind of love, but the dark, black form of love. She was obsessed with him, and he made it a goal to make him equally mad about her. Thus, showing up everywhere he used to be, and then getting all angry and possessive if his attention shifted to another human except her. I never wanted to indulge in the world of emotions, let alone marry someone and dream about creating a family with them. But then you pushed your way through my life and then you claimed me as a whole. Now you find this suffocating? You think I'm controlling you? Suddenly you want a normal life? Jungkook shook his head and stepped back. He tried to mask his emotions, but those treacherous feelings showed up on his face. He was hurt, very hurt. He never thought an argument like that would ever suffice between them, that would make him feel that they were poles apart. By then, the drunken fog had cleared off her head. She was sober enough to understand the gravity of the situation. She knew she had hurt him and she needed to apologize. It would be wrong to cover her mistakes with the excuse of being drunk. She went too far to prove her points and to satisfy her ego, and all she was left with was guilt. Jungkook, she took a step closer and tried to hold his hand, but he stepped back. Her heart sank at his rejection, but she felt even more guilty when she noted his red, glossy eyes. She wanted to beat herself black and blue for hurting him. Go to sleep. Saying so, he walked past her, but she stopped him again by holding his arm. We promised to not turn our backs at each other after an argument. Like you promised to take care of yourself for me, for taking guards along. So I don't get bonkers for your safety. Her grip loosened as he uttered those words. You broke one, I broke one, we are even now. His words didn't hurt her as much as his tone did. It felt so distant, so cold as though he was talking to some stranger. But she brought it upon herself. He wrenched his arm around out of her hold and stormed out of the room, slamming the door shut behind him. She took a shaky breath. Tears welled up in her eyes and started falling one after the other. Anger, known as the biggest enemy of a human because it makes them self destructive. It blinds their perception and meddles with the understanding of wrong or right. The worst damage happens when anger makes them want to satisfy their ego. It makes them want to hurt others to prove their point. It makes them feel powerful, but this power is hollow and momentary. It fades as soon as anger dissipates, and all they leave with the fragments of their destructions and the mess that comes along, including guilt and sadness. But as the words said in anger can't be taken back, the same way the mess can't be met, not without redemption. Observing the mess Vine had created for herself, her redemption wouldn't be short and easy coming. It would take a long time to gain forgiveness from her husband, but she would do it. She had to because she couldn't afford to lose him, not after all the things she had done to reach him.